Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to episode number 16 of the White Knuckle Podcast. Well, hey, everybody, thanks again for downloading the latest White Knuckle Podcast. Today, we've got a great guest in Ben Rising. He's got a lot to say, and we have a great conversation about deer hunting, deer tactics, life, kids, family, just about everything. But before we get into that conversation, we need to take just a minute and thank the folks that make this show possible. Ozonics, undetectable, undeniable. Lone Wolf, your silent partner. Vortex Optics, the force of optics. Spartan Camera, you don't have to be there. Wicked Tree Gear, Coons Engineering, and Stick and Pick. Last, but certainly not least, Land Pros. That's LANDPROZ.com. As I said before, we had a great conversation with Ben Rising, so without further ado, here is our conversation with Mr. Ben Rising. Well, hey, everybody, welcome back to the White Knuckle Podcast, episode number 16. Today, with me, as always, is Todd Pringnitz, and also, we are joined by Mr. Ben Rising. Ben, Todd, how's it going?
Good, man. How are you guys doing today?
Oh, things could not be better, man. I'm excited to talk with Ben. To be honest with you, I've been thinking about it today, coming up with a lot of different questions that I've had for him because I've respected him as a hunter for a long time and actually enjoyed watching Ben for many years through the Drury series, and Jason and I were talking about today, Ben. You've had an opportunity to do some really cool things, and through the different productions that you worked for, different TV shows, like a lot of people have had an opportunity to share in your story, and what a blessing that is. And just I appreciate you coming on the show, and I can't wait to get started, man.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you guys having me. I mean, I do, and the respect is mutual. Todd, I mean, you know, I've watched White Knuckle Productions for some time, so yeah, we've had a lot of exciting things going on, that's for sure.
Well, I ran into Ben this past ATA show, and one of the things I told Ben was when I really kind of started becoming a big fan of his was when I watched him kill that giant 9-pointer in Ohio on what Drury production was it, Ben?
Whitetail Madness 6.
Whitetail.
That was. Yeah.
Okay. But dude, just, you could look through his eyes into his soul at that moment when he was doing his interview in the tree stand, and he had me because I was like, dude, this guy cares nothing more than just, dude, he just is a whitetail freak. And I felt him and I cried with him, and I was a huge fan after that. But you obviously have the whitetail fever like the rest of us, where, like, dude, no matter what you're doing, day in or day out, some way, shape, or form, you're thinking about how you can apply that to whitetails or the buck that got away. But Ben, your background, why don't you give us a snapshot on who the heck you are and what you've been doing, man?
Okay. Well, I mean, my whole life, you know, I grew up in Ohio. I've been a Buckeye boy my whole life, and I grew up hunting and trapping. My dad taught me to trap and hunt at a real young age. And I think trapping was, and I've said this many times, I think trapping was the thing that really made me such a great deer hunter, you know, when it came time for me to fall in love with whitetails. But, you know, I grew up on a small farm, helped a lot of farmers around, and started working in the sawmill at the age of 16. Or age of 15, and working for farmers. And then I slowly started working in the woods as a timber cutter at the age of 16 to 17, and then went full-time cutting timber once I got out of school, and buying timber and, you know, logging. Started my own logging business when I was 20. Got married when I was 24, and have 3 kids of my own and 2 stepsons, and married to my wonderful wife, Melody, for 18 years this year. And
congratulations. That's awesome.
Dude, that in itself is, believe me, man, that's a feat in its own. So congratulations just in that matter.
Yeah. I think she's being paid to be married to me this long. But,
as I think all of our wives are probably.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, there's no truer statement that behind every decent man, there's a good woman. And I'll tell you, I mean, she holds the glue together. She's the glue of this whole family, and she is truly the reason I even started filming deer, believe it or not. I mean, she really is. She bought me a Drury's Whitetail Madness video for my birthday when I think that was in like 98, something like that, 99.
Okay.
And I was hooked. You know, I had always loved deer hunting and watching Drury's, you know, or watching DVDs, you know, hunting shows. I'd never seen the Drury's at that point.
Sure.
But that was the one thing that, you know, I just fell in love with their productions of how they did it. And that was kind of back in the day when they did the old journal type series, you know.
Yep.
And it just really locked me in. It kind of was like you when you watched me kill that deer. I felt their passion in what they were doing, and it just kind of flipped me right into the whole just taking it a step further, you know, and really learning about deer. And you know, I've always killed deer, but they just kind of made me want to take it, you know, to a better level. And who would ever thought? And you know, 4 years later, I'd have been doing some filming for him and stuff. But it's just funny how God works and how things work out in your life. But yeah, I mean, my wife is the result of, you know, this whole filming thing that's been my career for the last, you know, along with the timber. You know, everybody thinks I film for a living, but we don't. You know,
you got that right.
Yeah, and they all think we make hundreds of thousands of dollars. But anyway, she's been my biggest supporter, and you know, and it's amazing when you have a partner like that pushes you to go out of state hunting or go hunting. And because I know so many guys that don't have that, you know, and it really locks them up.
Yeah, you couldn't be more dead right. And to be honest with you, I think I can say I have the best wife in the whole world for the same reason. She supports me, understands me, and never holds hunting against me. And I think Jason can say the same thing. We're all fortunate guys from that standpoint. And it seems like harmony in life creates successes at all levels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, yep. And I mean, you know, we all, you know, when you're guys and you're rambunctious like we are, you know, you all go through phases and you make stupid mistakes, and whether it's in jobs or life or whatever, but you know, women can really sustain a lot and they support you. And I mean, it's amazing, like you said, how you can rebound and come back from things in your life. And I mean, then you can have that success when you finally get that harmony, like you're talking about, and how, you know, things really jive, and the things that we think were important when we're 24 years old, as we get to be 42, like I am now, you realize how they were not important at all. You know?
Yeah, dude. And in the business we're in, it's always interesting to meet. I've always found it quite interesting to meet different people in the hunting industry. And, you know, the truth of the matter is, man, the killers have a bit of a aggressive personality generally, or at least, you know, have that killer instinct where they want to win, and they want to win generally at all levels in life. And sometimes it's hard to mesh those personalities when we're kind of all in competition. But it's cool when you get to a point in your career, and which is our hunting careers and our lives, where you kind of hit those personal goals and it starts to become fun again, and it starts to become just for me now, this is the most enjoyable aspect of what Jason and I have been doing with these podcasts, is talking with guys like you. And no matter who we talk to, something comes fresh out of the conversation that I learned something, and I look at something from a different standpoint. But all the great stories from unique hunters all kind of have the same common mesh and background, but the personalities and everything. And what I like about you, Ben, is you're kind of similar mindset, where you're not afraid to say what you think, and you're right most of the time. And it's guys like you that have had to deal with. I can't imagine you do outfitting, correct?
Yeah, I have an outfitting business too called Wicked Ridge Outfitters. Started that in 2000. I started outfitting in 2009, but with another guy, and then we kind of just went separate ways, and he kept doing outfitting, and I started my own too. And we're still good friends and everything, but I started Wicked Ridge in 2012. And it's going really good. We run around 7,000 acres of ground here in Ohio, and take about 50 guys a year. And,
that takes a lot of work, guys. Dude, this kid's so freaking killer.
Yeah. I mean, I finally hired a full-time guy last year. named Rich Riley. And then I've got a neighbor boy that works timber with us, Wyatt Meller, that he's young. He's like 20 years old. And I mean, he's just kind of a lifesaver too. You know, they help out a lot doing the daily stuff. And, you know, it's just, you know, you talk about never ending deer. You can almost get tired of it because we have so much going on, truthfully.
I don't know how you, dude, I have no idea how you do the outfitting thing. We were friends with over the years. We, you know, did everything to get on ground that we had to, which was helping outfitters and guiding and doing whatever we needed to do to get on a piece of ground, basically. And that is a tough business to be in, that service industry, because, man, when the conditions are tough and you're not seeing deer, it's your fault. When somebody else kills a different deer on a different property, why wasn't I able to hunt that property? It's your fault. It's a different type of business. So God bless you, Ben. I don't know how you juggle outfitting with the tree business, but my real interest with you and talking with you when we were at the ATA show, man, we started talking about habitat management stuff. And when you were talking about your background as a forester, man, a professional, like, I want to be a professional, and I am so green. I've almost killed myself 20 times in the timber cutting down trees already. So as soon as we started talking, I was like so excited because I have so many questions, because I've been shooting from the hip basically for the last 3 or 4 years on my own property. I've been kind of like doing the whitetail dream, expanding a little bit each year, getting additional pieces that I can kind of control and trying to improve them. And I feel like I have done about 50-50. Like, some of the spots I've like done some stuff in have really worked out, and then other ones just have sucked. And I feel like I've almost ruined some of them. So from my standpoint, that's my most excitable moment, is talking with you about doing some of these things in the woods. Jason, have you done any tree work before much?
Yeah, absolutely. I've so the property that I owned up until 2 years ago, the first year, Ben, that I had it, it's 37 acres of timber. The Department of Natural Resources forester came in and told me that I needed to get rid of the cherry. So I said, okay. At that point in time, cherry was about as hot as timber could be, so it was a good move for me financially, I guess. But in doing that, it created today a major problem, and that's not really where we're going to go with this conversation. But yeah, I mean, my wood, the timber right now is just absolutely filled with buckthorn, and that's, you know, not an easy invasive species to get rid of. I don't know if you deal with that a whole lot down in Ohio or not, but yeah, I've spent plenty of time with a chainsaw in my hand. Certainly not to the extent that Ben has. But yeah,
dude, I had at one point, I went to my local co-op and like I walked out looking like I reminded me of Dumb and Dumber when the dude comes out of the Western shop wearing the frickin' cowboy hat and the chaps and the frickin' vest and he's dragging a saddle, right? I had the chaps, I got the helmet with the frickin' ear things, and I had I got the chainsaw. I bought a 280 Farm Boss. I'm like, dude, I need a big chainsaw because I'm going to be cutting some big timber down. So I went out with about 20 minutes to a half an hour. I was so humiliated that I didn't know what the heck I'd bought all this crap for, because I'd locked my chainsaw, bent my chain by that point 4 times or something, and nearly killed myself because I thought, well, bigger's better. So I just went to the biggest trees and started like hacking down some monsters. And Ben, as you know, they don't necessarily fall where you want them to. And I went back like this past year just scouting some of my first time where the first areas where I went in, and I'm just like, oh my God, I should have died that day, you know? Dude, it's first and foremost, man, it's very dangerous work. And I don't think you can be too safe, at least from my experience. But with that being said, man, I've gone way down. I started with a 280. I run a 180cc little lightweight handsaw now, or a little lightweight chainsaw, a little steel. But my background and experience with doing hinge cutting and whatnot, Ben, is basically you're creating bedding areas or creating features or cover where you want to obviously hold the deer. There's another side of that. You can create like barriers and stuff like that. But when you go into a piece of timber, man, I got one piece I'm going into tomorrow. Like, what is your goal with a general ridge next to a bedding area, or what? I guess give us your 411 on what types of cuts you do for whitetails outside of like the logging industry specifically. And I mean, tell us what the heck, how do you approach this?
Well, a lot of it depends on what, so like, commercial timber cutting and then, deer management can go hand in hand at times. We get landowners that request, they want to sell some timber for financial reasons. They want to manage their woods, but yet they also, if we can, they want to be able to do some stuff where they can, benefit the deer, not destroy the woods. And so, you kind of have to look at all aspects of what a landowner's goals are, if it's just strictly deer, or, if it is to manage the woods too for timber value for future cuts. You don't want to be going in there and whacking down, 18-inch red oak or walnut trees that, are going to be good money trees for you down the road, But, one rule of thumb that I try to really, look at is first, I like to see how the deer use the farm. And I try to let the deer tell me where the best areas could be to maybe create some more bedding if they need it, or, some travel pattern changers, to maybe make a move into a different direction a little bit, or, sometimes just making a deer move 50 yards in one direction gives you the advantage you need to enter a stand or exit it with the right wind all the time without being undetected closer to a bedding area or things like that. It is an art. I mean, it's not something that you can just teach somebody over a podcast or even in an 8-minute web show like we try to do sometimes, there's just so much to it, like knowing which trees to cut, which ones not to cut, learning your species is a real big thing. I mean, I don't know if that's what you're asking me or if you want me to,
Well, I know one thing. The last podcast we did on this topic where I went in and created this unbelievable thicket, I got a email or a message from a forester who said, you just got a $1,500 walnut down. I'm like, well, that should have been good to know before I did it. But the stupid part about it was I had previously had my part of why what Ben's talking about and getting paid back is when you're looking at trying to create your dream property and be able to even buy property, you have to figure out how you're going to pay for it. If you have tillable income, that's one possibility. If you have CRP income, that's another possibility. If you have timber, that's another possibility. And I'll tell you, I was shocked because I got about 2.5 times what I had planned on getting just because the black walnut prices were incredible. And it paid for my down payment on my farm. I mean, it took a year or whatever, but literally off of 30 trees, I made my down payment on my farm. I couldn't not believe it. And from that moment, it was like a notch in my brain of like, wow, that's a real income. And they only took 30 or 40 trees. I mean, oh my God, it's significant.
Yeah, if they're the right kind of walnut, the right trees, things like that, it makes a huge difference, and they got to be the right size, things like that. But man, there is some real value in the right kind of timber if somebody's being honest with you. You know what I mean? And so You don't want to make mistakes, and that's why it's good to get an opinion from somebody. Even if it costs you, $500 to $1,000 to have a guy like me walk a property and give you good advice and, non-biased opinions to educate you, it can save people serious money in the long haul.
Well, and when I had mine, I'm in Southeast Iowa here. I had through my family, my wife's family knew a guy, Nick Spielman actually, and he did a great job. He had everything quoted and the price range of what came back. And he did it very straightforward. It was 10% of whatever got cut. Yep. And he quoted it. And the price range was from one extreme to the other. I mean, from 25% of what I got paid all the way to what I got paid. I could not believe, and he actually couldn't. He was shocked at what some of the prices came back, but it was just he found the right buyer for those trees that could use them to the best benefit, and the prices were good at the time. So anyway, timber value is such a huge thing, but I want to get right back to talking big whitetail strategy. I watched one of the spots that I went into were right, man, within 10 yards where I dropped that big walnut. A couple of years ago, I watched a big mature deer cut our scent, and Kyle and I were up hunting, and the wind was blowing terrible, and it was swirling, and we had 2 ozonics in the tree, but he caught human. I mean, that's just the truth. He just caught some human scent. And when he bugged out, I watched where he went, and man, he put his head down, and he freaking went right down in the sanctuary. And I watched his travel pattern, and it was something that was just like, you could see the instinct in him, like the direction he wanted to take. So kind of put that little like mental note in my brain. And now this year I ended up killing my buck right on the downwind side of this brushy it looks like a blowdown. I mean, I dropped way too many big trees. I eliminated travel through an area. But I kind of saw that in my next hunt. And then this year I hunted and I ended up killing mine right coming on the downwind side of it because he couldn't go through it. And it was like, even though I screwed it up, I ended up adapting to that situation and figuring out a way to use it to my benefit. And I think from what I know, man, of at least like doing hinge cutting and stuff, man, the deer kind of like are consistent, but at sometimes they will completely do the opposite of what you would ever imagine.
Yeah, well, and that's the truth. I mean, we can always have the best laid plans, but sometimes they don't always work out. And, I can tell you that this is one thing I've learned. And, as I've, become into this whole, educational side of things and starting my own web show, Whitetail Edge, and just like you do with White Knuckle, you kind of have to give up secrets and you kind of have to give up things, to have content to make people interested. And
yes, you do.
Have you ever, so just, I'll ask the two of you, have you ever noticed certain farms that just are always notorious for having big bucks? Like, whether they're your farms or just an area in your county or your neighborhood have you ever noticed some farms like that just always have big mature deer on them?
Absolutely.
Whether they're managed or not managed.
I kind of have always associated it to mineral, to be honest with you, or like the soil.
Okay. Well, but so here's another thing to think about. Like, I can remember when I was younger, and I first got my very first lease, was all jacked up, and this farm always had big deer on it. You'd always see big deer in the summer, and they were always there. Well, I get the farm, and I go in there, and I'm like, oh, my gosh, I'm going to put food plots in here. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that.
Trail cameras on every freaking tree.
Well, yeah, I mean, not so much that, but, I thought I was going to go in there and improve that habitat and do things. I was putting food plots in corners where there was CRP or it already growed up and been thick. And, and I'll tell you what, I ruined it. I did. I mean, I ran all those big bucks out of there instead of giving them that, what I have found with what I have found with really big deer, like the kind of deer that the people that gripe and say, well, I ain't a trophy hunter, but every one of them would cut their left arm off to shoot one. And we all run into that where guys, this industry now is getting to the point to where, I don't shoot deer. I shoot them now, yes, because I like big horns, but that's not how I started out. It just happens to be that sometimes the deer that challenge me the most personally are the biggest rack bucks in the woods. They're the deer that flip my trigger. They're the ones that give me the fits, that make me second guess myself, make me lay awake at night and wonder what I'm doing wrong or how can I get on this deer. But, anyways, what I'm getting at is sometimes we as humans, we overthink situations and we need to really look at the farm first and go, why are they here now? And what is it about this farm that those big bucks like every year? Why do I see him in this corner every year? Or, then you can slowly start to decide, all right, I should mess with this, or I need to do things. It's those farms that I pick up that I notice that don't have that big age structure on them already. Those are the farms I rip into like a madman, putting food plots in or thickening them up or doing whatever I need to create that habitat for the whitetail to make those big bucks want to stay there. You'll notice on farms, like a big whitetail deer, an older deer, is an animal that just does not like to be, he's kind of like an old Vietnam vet or an older guy like, we're getting. We don't want to go to college bars or hang out at places where you're going to be bothered all the time by young punks or, partying and all that. Cause we're just at that stage of life where we're just past that. Well,
like an old dog, like an old lab.
Yeah, that's right. And them bucks are the same way. They don't want to have to lay down in a nice, comfortable spot and have to worry about the rambunctious 2.5 and 3.5 year olds coming through there and messing with them and running them around. And, some deer can handle that, but most of the time you'll notice those bigger giant bucks take the farms that are the hardest to hunt. They're nasty, thick, don't have a lot of food on them, but they are just left alone. They have that seclusion factor. They have that just not, I don't know how you say it. They don't want to be around a bunch of deer.
It's like a safety blanket, man.
Yeah. They don't want to lay down in a treetop and have to look at a 4-year-old over there going, man, I wonder if he's going to want to kick my butt today when I go out to the food plot.
And it seems like, at least around here, the same, dude, you're speaking the truth. There's like, the old man syndrome, man. They're going to be in that area of the most inconvenience for any access you can imagine. And they're going to be like, at least around here, we have a lot of topography to work with. They're always at an elevated point and or a point where the winds are just murder.
Yeah. Yep. And one thing that you'll notice about a big deer, I've seen deer walk a major long way in all kinds of weather to feel safe to eat. Like where they'll wait till dark, but they want to live in bed where they are safe and where they feel comfortable, but they'll walk through all kinds of pressured property at night to get to that food source, but they're back to where they need to be well before daylight. And I've seen them do this a mile, mile and a half in brutal weather. I've gotten pictures of deer doing that, and it just blows your mind. I mean, people just don't really understand how witty an old whitetail is. They're survivors. I mean, that's truly their nature. They're just a survivalist. They're a master of survival, and they're tough. And I mean, you can't ever disrespect them. And the minute you lose the respect of what that deer does, that's when you really start losing your game of being on a big deer, because, they just are a different breed, man. They're just a different type of animal when they turn 5.5 to 8.5 years old.
And brother, every time you shoot one of those, and I hope at least every time I shoot one of those deer, when you look into the camera, how rare that moment is and how special that moment is, because they are just so non-vulnerable. They've survived all those years, and that moment, all of a sudden, Ben Rising, myself, Jason, or you out there listening, boy, when you have that moment and you make it happen and you do your job, there is not a feeling on earth, and there's not a check someone could write me to replace that for enough money. There is absolutely nothing else, and it has nothing to do with the antlers. It is just like when you have hunted that animal for so many years, dude. You almost become, at least I do. I almost look at them as unkillable, and then that way I don't have to feel bad at the end of the year if I don't kill that deer. You will never ever control 100%. I don't care who you are, man. I've met a lot of really good deer hunters, and I'm just trying to get up to the Brad Coonert status or the Mark or Terry Drury status or Don Kissy status. I'm still trying, man. I'm still trying. But there is something to be said about killing one of those deer, and it's not the kill. It's just you've matched wits with that animal for that one moment in time. And on top of it, if you can get it on camera, what a miracle, dude. I mean, dude, how lucky are we?
No, yeah. I mean, when you take an animal's life like that, you have to think about it in a sense of that you just took a monarch out of the system, and I don't ever take that lightly. I've had people say, man, why do you always thank God and get a little bit emotional, And it's like, well, I'm getting a little emotional right now. I want to throat punch you for even asking me that. Because, it's like, why would you even, how could you not understand that? Instantly when people say those kind of, I just lose my focus in that conversation. Don't even want to talk to them anymore, because it's like, I know at that point I am not talking to a whitetail hunter,
Yep. They're a Facebook hunter.
Yeah, or a computer screen hunter. They're the guys that get on Facebook and slam guys like me for trophy hunting or whatever. Well, you know what? Those are the same guys that wake up in the morning and look at the mirror and they aren't happy with themselves because of their success in the whitetail woods, because they can't get it done, because they can't figure it out, And so whatever. I mean, I'm just saying, to the guys out there that really respect it, I respect them. I respect those guys and understand. But, when you harvest a deer like that, that feeling is, it's kind of like how the Indians, they took it so personal, and it was, they're taking something that God has given us in Mother Nature. And, it's just, I don't know how you say it, man. I mean, it'll choke me up every time that it happens.
It's such a gift. It really is. It's a gift.
A miracle, man. Frickin' miracle.
It is. It is. It's truly a gift. And for us, and that's what really drives me insane about the animal activists and the tree huggers. They are so far from understanding what they think they know about this earth that it just, you almost feel bad for them because they don't really get it,
Man, I just left a job because I've been in the car business a long time, and went down to the People's Republic of Madison to work, and I made it a whole 4 months because I was afraid to tell anybody that I ever killed anything because I was afraid they were going to leave the store. But you're right; they don't get it. They don't get it on any level.
Yeah, I mean, they don't understand that. Like, even the Bible talks about how we're to be stewards of the land and what that means. And they don't understand that how much money us as sportsmen and hunters put into the system to pay for our park systems and, wildlife management and employees and, all the stuff that they enjoy, but they don't really understand that that's how they're getting to enjoy it to a degree,
Oh,
exactly.
Well, if there's anything I've learned in the last 8 years, and specifically the last 6 months through the election process, they ain't never going to get it. So we might as well get on a different topic.
Yeah, that's right.
That's true.
They sure won't.
Ben, one of the very specific things that always triggers my interest in talking with guys like you is it takes. What I love about your story, and it's so perfect, is that you grew up in trapping. You're a professional forester. It takes those types of interests in the nature and in the environment and the habitat of these animals. You can't be a fall hunter. If you're going to be a fall hunter, you better pay a guy like you to be doing that work year around to know where those deer are, where the buck is, where that 4 or 5 year old was last year that you want to put a client on this year, or that you're going to be hunting. It takes a year-round commitment, but the stuff that I'm most always curious about is specifically, mature whitetail behavior. And I've not been very fortunate for a very long period of time to be hunting mature deer. I really haven't. I've only immersed myself into actually knowing where a big buck lives and hunting him for maybe like the last 6 years, 7 years, give or take, of actually hunting the same farm year and year and year again. What I've noticed are specific spots on my farm and on some of the neighboring farms that I hunt where big bucks will always be, just like what you're talking about, and how the wind affects them, different hunts and how they use the wind to their benefits. If there's one thing when I'm going out tomorrow and I'm doing some chainsawing, and specifically this time of year, other people on the message boards I've been reading, everybody's kind of in that mood where they're ready to go out and start chopping stuff down. What can you say as a great tip for anybody out there who may not be hunting huge, big whitetails like we do, but maybe in their area, a 3 or 4 year old is the top end whitetail? What can you tell them, even if they hunt 10 acres like Jason Science is hunting or whatever, a small piece of property up in Wisconsin? Is there something that you can leave with every hunter out there as far as if you got a chainsaw, what can you go out and do to help your property in a snapshot?
Well, one thing that in Ohio, one thing we deal with is that baiting is legal here. So every guy is throwing corn on the ground or got feeders or, it really, in Ohio, it's become really a tough thing, because you can have 10 acres of ground and you can, you may lease a farm, like I may lease a 300-acre farm that I'm trying to manage real hard, and the neighbor may own 13 acres and may corn pile the living snot out of that 13 acres or 15 acres or whatever it is, to where when we have as many farms as we do for the outfitting and the shows and all that, your guy would go broke trying to feed all those farms religiously. So what happens, and this happens to us every year, we have guys that have these small farms that can afford to feed those farms all year round because that's the only spot they're feeding. And at some point it affects, because they're sucking deer off of us, whether they're following does and heat in or taking advantage of their late season stomach.
Giant hot spot in your area. I mean, it's a giant hot spot in the area that's going to draw everything year round. Yeah.
And so when I have, and we do feed deer. I mean, we've learned that we don't necessarily kill those big deer off of it because I've learned that they're pretty darn tough to kill like that. But we've learned that we got to have something there, whether it's a good Antler King food plot or, a good food source, like, putting, good feed out, that gives them a little something to keep them in the area till you can at least monitor them. And then you still hunt them like regular deer.
Sure.
But, depending on what somebody's based with, you have to look at the weaknesses of your property. You have to sit down and be like, okay, whether I own 37 acres, do I ever see deer in here consistently? Do I hold big bucks? Do I only get them passing through my farms? Do the deer trails just cross through here, or do they stage? And so then you have to look at your property and be like, okay, I'm not holding deer, so I need to go. I got a south-facing hillside that I know is going to get a lot of sun and cold weather. The timber's a little bit scrubbier on that hillside. I can release some of these trees and I can start to thicken that hillside up so I can maybe give these deer a holding area, a staging bedding area that's in the sun in the cold times of year, or even in the summer. Maybe there's a little bottom there, and maybe you're an early season hunter and you're trying to hold those deer early and stage them up in there before they leave your property. A lot of times, if you give them everything they need, they won't move till dark, or they won't leave your spot till dark. So, I can't say go in and just murder all the trees on your property, but definitely, if you're giving those deer the bedding cover they need and you do it in different spots to where you're not congregating all the deer in one spot on your farm, because once you do that, that's where it gets hard, because the doe groups will start taking those best bedding spots, and then them bucks will actually avoid it until the rut.
Okay.
You know, so even on a small piece of property, you maybe need to, it could be 4 trees that you cut, Todd. It may only be 4 trees that you pick to cut down that have big, nasty tops in them and things like that. And you do that in different areas on your property, whether it's 20 or 40 acres, you would be amazed at how you can get some of those bigger deer and different groups of deer laying in those strategic spots. But you got to give them multiple spots, not just one, because like I said earlier, all them big bucks, they don't want to be where all the other deer are all the time.
Yep. Yeah, dude, you're like, there was I'm kind of fortunate where I'm enough in it to be able to study where some of these deer come from, where the bucks are and where the does are each year. And so what you were saying, you got to stack your deck, give yourself as many options as you can, because you never know where that buck's going to be come fall. But it also allows you to hunt for different winds in some of these different spots. I'm fortunate. I have the different areas that I can create these spots. And, you know, I imagine where, as a buck, I would want to be bedded, where I'd want to come stage, and where I'd want to go feed. And I try to kill them outside of their bedding area, coming into the staging area, generally. Like, that's just my kind of my rule of thumb. But the important part, I think, for all of this is, and what I've learned, at least over the years, is you've got to use your hunting knowledge from that area from year to year. For me, shed hunting tells a lot of the tales from the season that you just don't get to experience, because if you're a good hunter, you're going to stay out of your core areas. You got to keep some sanctuaries. But if there's some small brush, or like Ben, my problem is I have bedding area everywhere, dude. Within a mile of my house in all directions, it's a killer bedding area. So what I've done is I've been able to use food as my major draw. Mm-hmm. I'm the only guy who is leaving standing food on some of these farms, because it's all big Iowa tillable. These guys are cattle farmers. They're farmers. So in my agreements with these guys and things that I've been able to negotiate, I leave standing food, and I can literally pull the herd into that food plot just with does, right, throughout the year. Mm-hmm. A lot of the times I cannot get into the core areas of some of these big bucks I hunt that are for 9 months of the year. I get them for 3 months when I can control them with the does, basically. Yep. Outside of not putting pressure on your area, like outside of food, I mean, that's my big, like, as I'm listening to you talking about like not doing things, I'm thinking of my own farm, my personal farm right behind the house. And I'm like, dude, I don't think John Deere farmed more than I did this past year. Mm-hmm. And I'm out there all the time. And in my mind, I've always said, well, I got to enjoy my farm and all that. But I'm kind of getting to the point where you have so much food left over at the end of the year. I know I'm over pressuring, over farming, overdoing certain areas. And so that's where, like, now I'm like, my mind's thinking, like, what areas am I going to take off the food list and leave to the deer?
Yeah. Well, sometimes you can, if you have enough food or whatever, you know, you can almost make it hard to figure out where to hunt, you know, because you're giving your deer so many options. But then it comes to the fact where, you know, too, deer, you know, a lot of guys don't understand. And I mean, you know, there's zones. Like I call them zones. And I happen to know this one guy, and he's actually from Illinois. And, you know, I actually have leased land off this guy in the past, and he's a super good hunter. I mean, this guy's from the old days. I mean, he was killing, you know, 180, 190 type deer, you know, 15 years ago consistently. And he's killed so many that he's just kind of like, he don't have that passion for the whitetails anymore, but he still does. You know, he still hunts, and he gets a lot of guys on deer or whatever. But me and him have had these discussions, you know, and he loves me because I still have that passion for the whitetail, and he just digs that. But, you know, we've talked about how these deer have zones. You know, they have primary zones, secondary zones. And, you know, like, we consider an agricultural field a secondary zone. You know, you can get away with a lot in those zones of, like, fields of food, you know, going in there and planning and bumping around and running trail cameras on the edge. you almost get to the point, and I wrote an article a few years ago called Booneritis, and in that, and it was in Bowhunter magazine, and I kind of talked about how these deer have zones, and how you step across certain lines, man, and the bells go off. But if those deer encounter your scent consistently in certain areas in those secondary zones, they can deal with it, and they'll deal with it a lot, because the food is there and their cover is where they're bedding, and you never fool with them there. That is the key. So pressure is the major, it's like you said, we all know pressure, but I don't think really a lot of people really do understand pressure, and for the guys that are locked down to a 30 or 40 acre piece or one property to hunt the whole season, I feel for them. And so, the thing is what they really have to understand is that they have to hunt even 10 times smarter than a lot of guys, because they can screw it up so much faster by filtering, pressuring that property too fast, too quick, because they just want to hunt. You have to wait. You have to know your property and know, okay, this 40 acres is really only good in my bedding areas that I've created in the rut, because all the does are taking it up. Or I do have some bucks staying here, but I don't have the proper staging area to take them out early season. So I need to kind of, then you can dive in the rut and hunt those funnels or in between those bedding areas, catching those bucks cruising, looking for does in the bedding areas. You just got to bide your time and hunt, then they'll move. TV today and these shows, and I think that's a lot of the reasons why guys are really digging our kind of shows, Todd, is because we don't own 3,000 acres. And I'm not knocking the guys that do. God bless them. They're doing their dream and they're having fun. And all of us would love to.
We're all trying, brother. We're all trying.
Yeah, that's right. And so I would never knock guys like that in a million years, because who wouldn't want that? But what I can say, and even they will tell you, when you have that much control of land and growing those deer start to act different. Yes, they're still a big mature whitetail and they're still hard to kill, but those deer will not have to travel as far. They will not have to bed as far from the food sources. And so they get a little bit easier to pattern than say bucks.
They're a natural whitetail, man. They're a natural whitetail
they become how God intended them. I mean, big bucks are really fat and lazy.
They are.
Yeah, they become those sarcastic, freaks about surviving when they have the pressure that most of us have to deal with. And so then you have to find out how to take care of that weakness, which you're finding out that you have a lot of bedding, almost too much to a degree. So you figured out that the food going into late season is their weakness, because a lot of the crops are picked. So you're taking advantage of that and you're doing the right thing. You're staying out of the bedding or only hunting certain spots in the rut. And then you hunt those secondary zones come late season, taking advantage of them needing to rebuild their stomachs.
And to be honest with you, my biggest advantage, and Jason just had an opportunity to come see my area that I hunt. I've got a very good situation where I've got access in the right areas from all directions, and I can hunt specific spots, even in some of my deepies, my deep areas. But now I've got a half dozen killer buck bedding areas where throughout the season I can throw a bone and I can go in and be aggressive one day on a hunt, because that's not the area I'm worried about hunting a week from now or 2 weeks from now. And Ben, the one thing I think, everybody wants to talk about being, a good hunter and all this, but I'll tell you, the guys who kill big deer are not only good hunters, but you are never, ever, ever going to kill the deer we're killing on properties that don't have those deer. So as much as we all want to just be out walking around looking for buck rubs, the fact of the matter remains, you have to be a killer when it comes to talking with landowners, with farmers, with anybody who will give you a second, building relationships with those people. It's not about manipulation or trying to offer them money. That will not fly with most farmers. Farmers do not want to talk about money. You meet them the first time, generally speaking, at least around here, man, it's like, it's almost an insult. So it is, you have to be very strategic and very smart, just like the way you hunt whitetails with your landowners. the people you work with, because I'll swear to you right now, dude, and you know it, I would rather have the right piece of ground in one day than have frickin' 10,000 acres in frickin' 10 months. I mean, just give me one day on the right piece of ground, and you and I and Jason and guys who know what they're doing, you can go in and you can kill an animal on that farm if it's the right farm with the right circumstances. And I think it's just, that's the hard part. Nobody wants to talk about it, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you have money, because I'll tell you, most of the farmers and my neighbors, specifically here in Iowa, where I have access and I have property, it wasn't money that won them over. It was my work ethic, my Christmas cards, my blueberries every year for years and years and years before I really asked much of them at all.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I mean, that's kind of the same thing. I mean, I've always been hated. And that's one thing, success breeds hatred, whether it's because you're good at picking up a piece of ground or, getting permission to hunt farms or, and I've killed 3 booners on property, 3 deer over 176 to mid-80s on property that other people could hunt,
wow.
At the same time.
Oh, really?
That's awesome.
And on film. So
that's,
it's really, you can still do it. And to the guys out there that are struggle with that, it still can be done. You just have to really think differently. And, one thing I do really want to stress, Todd, and I mean, like with the way social media is today, and you see, like, I really get disheartened when I see these 15-year-old kids or 16-year-old kids on social media saying how to pass that buck up. Some guy shot a 140 or a 145, and they're like, I don't know, I ought to pass that deer. He's too young. You know what, dude? When I was 16 years old, I killed everything that walked and breathed. And that is what teaches you about animals and how they work. And you got to enjoy the sport. You can't let this whole idealism now of trophy hunting and TV hunting, and you have to only kill Pope and Young deer or booners when you're at a certain age. And I don't care if you're 35 and you've never killed one of those and you're just starting to hunt, man, you need to enjoy it for what it is. And if you kill a 115 or a 120 and you worked your butt off to do it, you need to be proud about it. Dude,
I can't even tell you, Ben, how many deer that are still, well, they're not running around because they died probably the next year up in Michigan. But I cut my teeth in Michigan hunting public land where I didn't really have any. My neighbor John kind of got me into it, but he was, just a weekend warrior kind of hunter and made some other friends. But I basically kind of learned on my own doing exactly what you're talking about. Like, dude, I can't imagine putting myself in a tree, never killing a half dozen bucks and maybe a dozen does or whatever, and trying to film it all, like just out of the gate, never having that experience. You're like asking not only for disaster, but you're going to set yourself up to kill your own spirit in hunting, because I don't know, man, to me, like, I think about someday when I have a kid, I don't have any children yet, and I want my son to be able to go out and hunt without a camera. I want my daughter to be able to go out and hunt without a camera and have those experiences alone in nature and feel that moment for yourself between you, God, and that animal. And there's something about that where I think, just like what you said, man, social media, and like, you got to film it all. You got to film it all. And granted, we all film it all now. But, dude, I was hunting for almost 20 years before I really started filming. I think 17 years or something like that. But, I see so many guys doing the same thing you're talking about, like picking up a camera, trying to go out and they're trying to learn and film it. And that's asking a lot, man. These animals are tough to kill.
Yeah. Well, the thing is they want to be able to post that cool clip on social media so all their friends will like it, or they gain followers, or, I mean, it's just, I get it. They're setting themselves up. Like, they think that they have to compare so much to that standard, to where then, they can't concentrate on just having fun with it, or the camaraderie of it, like,
or just the challenge of the animal, dude. I mean, like, God, if you want to challenge yourself, go out just like Fred Bear. Remember in Ted Nugent's freaking Fred Bear was the song, actually. At the end, you want to go challenge yourself, go pick a brown bear, a polar bear, a freaking grizzly bear, right? Now, we're not hunting grizzly bears and polar bears like Ted Nugent and Fred Bear and probably all those cool guys do. But to me, I don't care about that. I care about hunting the animal in my territory, and I still have the same freaking passion for it today that I did when I was in Michigan and I was hunting does or little spike horns or whatever.
Exactly. Not everybody can be a Fred Bear or a Michael Waddell or a Todd Prignitz. It's just, you have to find your balance. You have to finally, I finally accepted the fact that I'm always going to be between 180 and 190,
Hey, I'll tell you, when I saw you at the ATA, Ben, you looked really good.
Well, I'm just saying.
I'm totally joking.
There's definitely they definitely have a level of commitment that's really no different than yours or mine. I think on many levels, it's just they're committed to different things than we are.
There's so much false stuff being shoved in these people's faces that these young hunters that are learning to hunt or by watching YouTube or whatever, they don't realize because they don't have a dad or a grandpa that's teaching them to hunt. They're just wanting to learn it on their own. And there's so much stuff that they're being showed that is not really the way that it happens because they don't understand the film world, They don't. And you're absolutely right. It's funny that we're even talking about this. Thursday night I have to do a speech at the new Quality Deer Management Association branch that is started in the area. And honestly, that's going to be my topic. I think in many ways, this industry, now that I've been in it, I've been filming for 9 years, but I've only been in the business side of it for a short period of time, and it's been quite a learning curve. But I think for a large part of the population, the bar that's been set by TV, by some of these shows, is so far from being attainable that it's in many ways wrecked a lot of people's desire to go out there and do what it is that they thought they loved to do in the first place. Does that make sense? Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it is becoming a sport that unfortunately is taking money to do it. People hammer me all the time because they say, well, you lease that farm my cousin used to hunt or whatever. Well, I'm sorry, but that's just the way it became around where I live. There's a lot of competition for ground. If I don't lease it, somebody else is going to lease it. And I started leasing ground because I got so tired of sitting in a tree stand and Johnny Jackbutt come walking through the woods with a crossbow, still hunting, right through a bedding area or something like that. And I'm just like, I was on a big deer and I knew what he was doing. I'd put my homework in. And this was the first year the guy had stepped on the farm for the whole year. He just, he always had permission to hunt it, but he didn't hunt till, and then he just walked all over the whole farm. And I just got so tired of that stuff happening. And so that's why I finally.
In one moment flat, everything, all the work that you put in is ruined.
Yeah, exactly. And bang, that deer's on the neighbor's next door for 2 days and he got killed, and you just get so sick of it that, so I did try to lease my first farm, and then it came to there. Well, then it got to the point where I got really good at it and I got good at talking to landowners about it and they saw the results and they loved talking to the landowners that I'd already leased from and how good we were. And they liked the idea of not having to deal with 25 people knocking on their door every year of hunting and dealing with all that. And they wanted to actually deal with somebody that held their word and said, hey, if you're going to come bale hay, we're going to do it. What day? And blah, blah, blah. Well, then it got to the point where we had so much ground that I literally had to start outfitting to pay for it because me and my wife just couldn't afford it. We raising 5 kids and, having our own logging business, being young, it just took money. Well, we weren't ever going to rob our personal life for a habit of hunting,
Sure.
And, thankfully, Mark and Terry Drury, I met them and we became good friends. And this was back in the early days when it was a lot easier to get into the filming, and it was still somewhat about the kind of deer you could kill, nowadays, I think, I killed 3 mega giants last year, a 184, a 180, and a 215, and sponsors still kind of question whether or not, I'm worth picking up. And it's like, sometimes you just sit there, feel like you're beating your head off a telephone pole because you're like, what am I even doing? I'm trying to run this web,
brother.
I'm trying to run this web show, and, you need funding to do it. And granted, I'm going to tell you what, it makes me love the sponsors that I have so much already, the ones that understand it and appreciate us for who we are. It really makes you appreciate those people, because trying to learn now I'm seeing how tough it was and why the juries and people like that were so hard on us about certain things, because I now see what they had to deal with the people that were sponsoring them, or what they demanded from them, or how hard it was to even get those sponsors. It's just a different world now. It just really is, and I mean, people now, there's so many, and I've also learned this with the sponsor part of things. Sometimes you get irritated because you're not getting back, people aren't getting back to you. But what sometimes we don't realize is that every day of every week, these product companies are getting slammed with emails of people wanting to be sponsored, and, it just overwhelms them, I guess. And, so it's, sometimes you just really have to sit back and feel humbled that you even have what you have as far as sponsors. But, we know that it's getting tougher every year too. Things are changing, in this industry, and everybody's got a video camera now, and everybody's doing something different.
The interesting part you brought up about sponsors and stuff, I get to see it from both sides, or I have, especially for the last 6 years. When I started Wicked Tree Gear, we had been doing white knuckle for 5 years or whatever. And so as soon as I started the product end of things, you get a different perspective on things, how many people are out there trying to do it. And because, I was there and I was doing it, am doing it, I get it. And so, the first 1,000 or 2,000 or 5,000 or maybe even 10,000 emails you answer and messages, and it gets to the point where it's like, now I'm fortunate where I get to shuffle those off to my compadre who has to deal with it. But there is a billion people out there trying to do it, and probably about 30 of them deserve it and should get recognition. But because there's a billion people out there, those 30 get lost in the shuffle, and unless you know somebody, or unless you kill something big or can strike a chord with somebody that works at one of these companies, you're never going to reach them. And that was kind of part of our conversation at ATA. We were talking about how, I've looked up to Ben for a long time for what he shoots and kills, because man, every one of them, I know how special they are and how tough they are to kill, especially under the circumstances that Ben is doing it without owning, thousands of acres of property like some of his friends and my friends and guys were trying to be. So that always puts a guy up on top of the list for me, no matter what. But talking about sponsors and that, the argument and or the discussion that we always have with people is, when we started out doing white knuckle productions, or when I started out all those years ago, my only goal was really to have a voice for the serious hunter that was not from a media bias, I guess, like a real educational thing, because there was something I found early just working at the Lone Wolf booth all those years ago, when you would tell somebody or, sell them a product, and they'd come back to you the next year and say, dude, I went out and I killed this buck, and they'd show you a picture of it. Back then they'd show you a Polaroid picture. But there was something about being a part of that hunt in some way, shape, or form. You influence them, help them. And I still do that with products, even the saws we sell and different things. Like, that's my real thing. And guiding, I can see as being the same kind of a rush or almost like a tap into the hunt of other guys. And not only that, dude, you get to learn from all those hunters that are out hunting your properties, and get to learn. And so you're not only hunting yourself in a tree stand, but you're hunting 15 different tree stands that you scouted and set and planned on hunting and wondered what the heck was going on. You can do a sample test in one night and learn so much. And the guy who taught me about that was Tyler Tissue, who used to guide for performance for Jake Roach and Justin Roach from Performance Outdoors here in Iowa. And that's what he used to tell me. He's like, dude, I used to learn so much just because I'd have all these stands set and I got to hunt them all the same night because I had guys hunting in all those sets. So is that something that kind of has been a part of your knowledge base, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. It definitely, you're setting up different farms when you have 8 guys in camp for a week and you're hunting, you definitely learn some things and you learn what deer do. And I'll tell you the one thing you really learn when you're an outfitter is you learn how to kill deer. It's like anything. You just have to make the right choices. I mean, we try to give everybody the equal opportunities, but it's not always easy. And, if the deer don't always cooperate and the weather don't cooperate, boy, it can get downright brutal. And like you said,
I don't know how you do it.
There's some of the worst weeks in the world to be an outfitter, And honestly, that's why I stepped back.
70 degrees the first week of November. All I can think about is the camps throughout the Midwest where guys are sitting around picking their butts going, what the frick do we do? And it's the outfitter's fault, it's always the outfitter's fault.
Yeah. And I mean, it's always fun when the hunters try to tell you what they would have done. I'd have put the stand right here, or this or that, or, but that's all part of it. I mean, it's, it's part of the game and you just kind of have to go with it.
I don't know how you do it with 5 kids. I have a cat, dude. And I'm telling you, I don't know how you do it. Yeah. And Jason too. Jason's got a whole nest full of children and stepchildren and like everything awesome. But like, dude, you guys are miracle workers in my world. I don't even know how you freaking do it.
Well, it all goes back to your wife. Really, it does. I couldn't do it without Judy's help. I couldn't sit in the office here for the last hour and a half talking deer hunting without an understanding wife. And I think you Ben, I think you'd probably agree that's a huge part to the equation.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, she's, like I said, it's without her support and her, backing it up, you couldn't do it. You would not be able to do it. Just like Mark Jury, his wife Tracy is one of the greatest wives ever, and same with Terry, Willa, she's awesome. And, they'll tell you the same thing, and without those kind of women behind you and supporting you and holding things down at home and paying the bills, writing the checks and sending them in the mail to take care of all that stuff, because we don't really care at that point while we're thinking about the antlers. We've talked a long time. We could probably talk 3 more hours about deer hunting. It's just how it is. But, it's just really important that I think that, the younger generations out there understand to have fun. It's not all about trophies.
Easy coming from a guy who killed a 180 whatever and a 180 whatever and a 200 and whatever last year there, Mr. Rising, you jerk.
Yeah. Well, the thing is you got to remember when I was 24 years old, I remember sitting in a tree stand thinking to myself, man, what would it be like to kill a booner? And, it just, you just have to evolve and you adapt. And I didn't live in an area where they were, prominent at the time. And, I killed a couple in that area and then I ended up moving, to a different part of Ohio where there were more of them. And I've gained a little more success at it. And, out of state, I try to hunt areas where they live. But learning the deer and their habits really is, you can't kill them if they don't live there. But if
you worked your butt off, you did the groundwork, brother.
Yeah. I mean, you have to put yourself in those positions to even be able to get a crack at one of them.
There's a price to be paid. Is there not? I mean, you're going to give up other things in life to have that kind of success. I mean, you didn't just, you didn't stumble out of bed on 3 days and kill a 180 and a 2 something. I mean, there's certainly, I think what a lot of young people forget is that, you probably get sick of me saying this, but I've said it to my salespeople over and over and over and over and over again. You got to do the work. If you work hard, you win. Bottom line, you work hard, you win. And it's the same in business, the same in the deer woods. Wouldn't you guys agree?
Yeah.
You've got to be able to harness that energy in some way, shape, or form. And I don't know if it's something that's learned or not, but I think I certainly know I screwed up on a ton of deer back in my early days, but I always, Ben, same deal.
Oh yeah, gosh, I can't even tell you. But those are what,
right?
Those are what teaches you. That's what taught. You have to learn to see. That's where people mess up. They don't stop and think. They just get pissed and go home. And they don't really sit there and go, okay, what did I do wrong? How do I not do that again? And how do you adjust and how do you change? See, that's the difference. And some people just have it in their system. Like for me, I was fortunate that when I was 6 years old, my dad was teaching me how to drown raccoons in a creek caught in a trap. So I learned the skills of death early, And
it ain't pretty.
And I know that sounds brutal, but I'm just telling you, that's the difference between a 215-inch deer walking 15 yards to you and standing at the bottom of your tree and looking at you and being at draw for a minute and a half and still being able to kill that sucker when he turns.
Yep.
That's why I say, going back to those youngsters, man, get out there and squirrel hunt, doe hunt, do some stuff like that. Get yourself broke into harvesting animals and making kill shots, whether they're trophy rack deer or just animals, just does or squirrels, or tune yourself into harvesting and, taking the lives of those animals and making proper shots. I mean, it makes all the difference in the world as you develop your skills and you start hunting those bigger bucks. Well,
that's what's gotten lost in so many ways is woodsmanship. I had an interview with Gene Wenzel, and he talked about that exact thing. You and I and Todd. I don't know if you guys are the same as me, but I grew up squirrel hunting first and rabbit hunting and things of that nature, and I didn't get to go bow hunting till I was 14. And I still rode my bike, 3 miles with a bow on my back and put tons of effort into it. But prior to that, I just hunted small game, and so often now today we start these kids out, and I'm guilty of it. I took my son out and put a bog pot under his 308, and 218 yards later he killed a 120-inch 10-pointer for his second buck, and I think to a large degree I hate to say dumbs down the whole process, but for them I don't think there's that much excitement in it because they don't. They didn't go through the process like we did.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, I've said it 100 times that I think my kids are suffering for the fact of me being such a deer nut in a sense. And so like, I'm actually literally, it's funny we're talking about this, but I'm literally trying to change that to a degree to where, I want my 9-year-old son that's going to turkey hunt this year, could learn, I'm not just going to be, necessary. I've never let any of my boys shoot big bucks at an early age. I've never done that. And I don't want to make people mad out there when I say that I think you're crazy if you let an 8-year-old kid shoot a 165, but, I've just not myself as a family, me and my wife, we have decided not to let that happen for our children. They've had to pass 140 and 150 deer, to the point to where they ended up shooting a 6-point that night, but they didn't work for that deer yet. They wouldn't have understood it and appreciated it at that point. And so like, they were just as excited to shoot that 6-point or a doe once it was dead as they would have been to ever shoot that 160-inch deer.
God bless
now,
Ben Rising.
I mean, now they see the work that goes into it. And as they grow, and if they have that desire to start chasing those kind of deer on their own, then I'll give them the keys to the kingdom to do that. But they're going to do it. But
they're going to earn it. You're going to make them earn it, brother.
No matter what our beliefs are, whether it's, a guy that hunts high fences or a guy that hunts wild or shoots a crossbow or shoots rifles or, in the end, we all are really trying to do the same thing, and we really need to support each other and understand it, whether you're a guy that goes on outfitted hunts all year or whether you're a guy that works your butt off, and hunts 15 acres because that's all you have to hunt. we all are still on the same team. And, you can't knock the guys that own 3,000 acres for getting there because they've done what they needed to have it. And you can't knock the poor guys that, drive deer or, piss you off because they're hunting the same farms you're hunting, or, we're all hunters, and we really all need to understand that at some point we're all going to need each other as the way this world is going.
Well, there you have our conversation with Ben Rising. Definitely a big buck serial killer and a wealth of knowledge when it comes to deer and deer hunting, and certainly land management and timber management. Again, we'd like to thank everyone for downloading this episode. If you haven't done so already, please go to iTunes or Stitcher and give us a review. Reviews are the way that we get better at what it is that we're doing, and they're also a way that we can decide which way to go in terms of guests in the future. So please don't make me beg anymore. Give us a review. For those of you who are new to the podcasting world and don't quite know exactly what to do, on your Apple device, grab your phone or any device that is from Apple, go to the iTunes store and search White Knuckle Podcast. This will help you to download the free podcast app that's produced by Apple. Subscribe to that show from within the app, and every time I produce a new episode, you'll get it downloaded right to your iDevice. For Android listeners, download the Stitcher Radio app. That's free. Doing that will accomplish the same thing as searching for it in iTunes. With that, we'll close out the show today. Thanks for listening. Go out there and have a great week and be awesome.